All right, everyone, remember when Lauren Southern briefly went to South Africa, and then when she started reporting on it and saying, hey, they're farm murders and stuff, people flipped out and they're like, there's no genocide in South Africa. And remember how at the time I said, yeah, there's no active ongoing genocide there because the number of farmers being killed is less than the growth rate by far, but you do have a much bigger problem that people are mysteriously ignoring, which is, hey, at any given time, the government there might decide to suddenly steal a bunch of people's land and start shooting them, put them on reservations or something. They've even got a legal precedent because it happened 100 years ago with the black population. South Africa is a weird place, and it's currently run by a group called the ANC. Now, there's also another group run by a man called Julius Malema. Now, Julius Malema's far-left movement, they're like literal commies. They have made it a fixture of campaigning. Yeah, we're going to, if we win, if we take command, we will expropriate all the white people's land. We're going to kick them off, fuck them. We're going to give it to other people. The ANC is now being looked at as a moderate group, and I'm sure they'll face very little in the way of ire from other countries or from Western media organizations if they do this. Their plan is much more gentle and kind. They simply want to change the Constitution, legalizing land expropriation, which is the same as theft. They then intend to go in and mostly they're just going to take unused land from white farmers and give it to, in some cases, people who have, like, I guess, some tribal affiliation or something. So you're still going to steal land, but trust us, there won't be a civil war. We're hoping we're not going to cause food shortages. We're not. But Malema's crazy. He wants to go in with guns blazing and take everyone's land. We don't want to do that. We just want to take a little bit of land. We just want to steal a little bit from part of the productive asset of the economy. And probably, who do you think will get that land? Do you think it'll be people who know how to farm, or do you think it'll be party cronists and loyalists? Well, if history is any indication, mostly it'll be the latter. They're not going to know how to farm that land. They're not going to give it to some random black person with Zulu tribe affiliation who knows about farming. Is like, yeah, I've managed my own farm for years now, and I want a slice of the pie because I can make it productive and keep it that way. They're not going to do that. They're primarily going to give it to people who donated to the party, to people who are, from the local leader, the local leader of the ANC youth party or whatever. They'll be the one that gets their 10 acres. That's what'll historically happen. Do you honestly think that the government of South Africa is capable of not being corrupt in administering such a land grab? We're talking about a significant proportion of all farmland in the country. By the way, I hate to say this, but modern economics in the intervened-in sense requires some land to remain fallow for some periods of time. You do realize that fallow land can be fallow for a reason, too. Could be you over-farmed it. You've got to let it lay there for a few years. You didn't rotate your crops right. Poor farming practices were the norm up until fairly recently in human history. A lot of our land is debilitated at the moment because of that. You remember the Dust Bowl? You remember why that happened? Mechanized, non-rotational monoculture grain farming destroyed the soil structure. And it all started to blow away. You know how they solved it? They planted a bunch of soybeans and then let it be fallow for a few years. No more problem. Soil gets restored. It's fine now. It's perfectly fine. Except where they're continuing to do shitty farming techniques. Do you honestly believe in a million years that the government of South Africa, run by a bunch of socialist-light dickheads, is actually going to be able to implement this? And it's a racist program in the most literal sense. If there were a country, let's say Poland, or Hungary, or the United States, let's say any other country in the world said, hey, now, we're tired of this group of people based on their ethnicity, their race, having so much land. It's a big problem. We're going to steal some of it. We're not even going to pay them for it. We're just going to take it away from them and give it to other people. We're going to give it to white people because, the white minority in this part of the country, they don't have enough land. There'd be a million news articles on it. It'd be the only thing they'd talk about for weeks. Why isn't CNN talking about the possibility that South Africa is about to amend its constitution in a massive land grab that could spark genocide? Do you honestly think that some of these farmers are quite well armed? The Israelis have gone over there to teach them combat methods recently. Do you honestly think that I think several million white farmers are going to give up that land willingly? Or do you think that some of them might fight back? And do you think when they start, there might be a lot of bloodshed? Now, they'll get wiped out. I mean, it's not like they can actually stand up to the South African military. In their case, there's too few of them. The manpower is too slim. I don't think they have enough allies among other political communities. I think one of the groups that's paid, oddly enough, I believe, the most lip service to not wanting them to be screwed over, I think, was the King of the Zulus. I'm not even joking. I think a few years ago he said something to that effect. He's like, well, you know, the government of this country is so fucked up, I almost wish the Europeans were back in command. And it's like, it's pretty sad. The ANC can't run the country. Malema's people are even worse. But remember those xenophobic attacks that happened in South Africa, I think 3 years ago, and they had massive riots in like Johannesburg and some of these places? It wasn't because, hey, white people stole our jobs. Or like in parts of East Africa, the Chinese have come in, the Chinese government has set up centrally planned factories and some of their private investors, and there are now like anti-China political movements there, some of which are mainstream. It's not like that. They were migrants from Mozambique and from Namibia and from other parts of Africa. These are other African people. Americans have a very difficult time with this, because they don't understand the fact that, yes, indeed, black is not entirely homogenous. Neither is white, by the way. They don't understand that either. They have these weird definitions, and they don't understand the subgroups within. So they just pick and choose what forms of racism are acceptable. That is, the liberals within this country. Absolutely. They're the total bigots. Look at the way that they're treating the situation. No, people are going to get land stolen based on their race? No, that's not racism, because the people getting their land stolen are like white and shit. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. You know, the Netherlands really is responsible, by the way. If the fighting starts and civil war breaks out, the Netherlands are singularly most responsible for absorbing these people, because they're going to become refugees. What are you going to do for these farmers? Are you going to give them a tulip farm up in the Dutch Highlands or something? I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think any European country has the balls. We might end up having to take a couple 100,000 South African refugees. Not all of them, by the way, would be white. But by the way, some of these people will almost certainly be black people they're like, hey, yeah, no, I don't support the ANC. Don't you think if fighting begins, it could spiral out of control and become a general political battle between the ANC and everyone else, or you know, other groups might stand with them or against them? It could it could hit the fan. Millions could die. But no one's going to talk about it. You know, the UN and the US government and the European Union's bureau heads and all these morons, they don't talk about something until it's already spiraled out of control. Oh, a little bit of fighting in South Africa? No, we're not going to talk about it. It's like Darfur. They waited until the last minute to set up a fucking refugee camp to help people who are being slaughtered by Islamic rebels over there, to the point where the situation got so bad Sudan had to split in half. But no, it's not a problem with, you know, the fact that we're so bureaucratically strangled. It's like watching fucking Star Wars Episode 1 or something in the Senate there. Everything gets bogged down in committee, I suppose. It gets bogged down because these people are ineffective. It gets bogged down because a legislative process shouldn't be in command of such things. You should have military leaders and an executive in charge of such response. But you won't do that because, of course, you don't have any balls, and because these oligarchs, they each want their own slice of the world pie under globalism. They want to enslave everyone. In South Africa, the ANC is like, hey, you know, Julius Malema is the bad cop. We're the good cop. Yeah, we're still going to steal your land, but we'll steal less. We promise not to shoot first, maybe, you know, and it'll just be the land you're not using. Don't worry about it. You know, your family's been here for a century, but, you know, it was the result of colonialism, so it doesn't matter. So in other words, let's say I'm a South African farmer, and my great-grandpa got land. He didn't do anything particularly. He just got a tract of land from the government then at the time to farm. We started farming. He's long dead. Grandpa's long dead. It's like me and my elderly dad are farming the land. And all of a sudden now the new government wants to come and do to me what was done to, you know, the people back then. That doesn't seem appropriate. That's like when people hear like, well, you owe us reparations for slavery. No, I don't. I don't owe you a fucking cent. I've never enslaved anybody. Deal with your own problems, because they are quite literally your problems. I'm not responsible for bailing you out for your own bad decisions. You're not responsible for what your ancestors did. Fucking do something productive. Plenty of poor people in the country. You'll find, surprisingly, that they're not all non-white. You know, you do realize that, right? You do realize that there's also a lot of poverty among white communities in South Africa. Some of these people, it's like, you know, basically going into maybe the Middle Appalachians here. Blighted area, you know, dirt floors and meth. Stuff like that. What are you going to say to them? Oh, you know, you have your eighth of an acre under your trailer. We're taking half of that because, you know, only the other side has your trailer on it. Fucking, we're taking your meth lab away. Somebody else can run your meth lab. Is that what you're going to tell these people? No, I think the ANC is run by bigots myself. opportunists more than bigots, though. I mean, they're doing this as a political ploy. Because the further left, the real commies are rising up quickly in South Africa because the ANC doesn't know how to balance a budget. They don't know how to run an economy. They fucked their country into the ground. This, by the way, their currency just collapsed because of this announcement. So they're trying to delay the inevitable, which is that the even further left will take over, and then there will be civil war. That's my prediction. I think if the further left replaces even the ANC, there will be civil war within South Africa and millions will potentially die. Which means that a once stable nation, not necessarily hyper-prosperous, but stable, generally speaking for the region, decent quality of living, it'll just collapse basically out of existence. Could even schism. You could have multiple countries form from what once was South Africa. I mean, it is a conglomerate of former states a la 100 years ago. It's not like it's got a long history in and of itself as a unit. Who cares at this point? I mean, you've got a government that doesn't represent a proportion of the population. Like, what is it, like 5 or 6% of the population or something? They don't represent, they hate you, actually. They think that you're a political pawn. By the way, this is just what the liberals here do on steroids. They do the same thing with welfare here. They're like, well, part of the population doesn't deserve representation, namely people who have made it. So we're just going to buy the votes of people who are poor by promising them a few more crumbs. And that's what this is. It's not going to alleviate South African poverty. You're not talking about expropriating enough land even to do that. I mean, because of its agriculture is a small proportion of the South African economy. How many people can you really uplift out of poverty by putting them on 10-acre farming patches? Yeah, a few 100,000 maybe, most. That's if you expropriate it and redistribute it all, commie style. And at that point, some countries will condemn them. So yeah, I think the ANC is run by morons. South Africa is run by morons. Yeah, absolutely. But you're not going to hear that from CNN because they still think of Nelson Mandela when they think of South Africa. You know, the greatest man who ever lived, the modern Jesus. You can't say anything bad about him. Fuck it. Yeah, you can't say anything bad about this country because it's Nelson Mandela's experiment in communism. It's basically what it boils down to. That's about all. Peace out.